Greetings, folkaroos, and welcome to the intermediate geared series on my channel, Hailey's Quest to 1600. This is where I share my games in chess from this past week and my goal to ultimately reach the rating of 1600 in rapid by the end of 2023. All right, so my woes continue this week, guys. It hasn't really gotten any better. I mean, you'll just see based on these games. Like, I don't know what is happening. I've hit a rut in my chess abilities, and you can share my misery and torment with me. All right, so let's hop into the first game without further ado. From April 18th, 2023. And both of these games had a common thread. Both of these games occurred when I was having dinner with a friend. It was like the one game I played while I was having dinner with him. And both of them were just absolutely amazing. Like, amazing not in the good sense, but amazing in the entertaining and educational sense. All right, so without further ado, let's hop in. So e4, c6, so we go into a Caro-Kann defense, and my opponent surprises me on move 2 by playing queen to f3. Like, of course, we know that the meta of the Caro-Kann is d4, and you can get into positions like this. This is how a lot of my games go, like Tartakower, bishop d6, knight f3, castles, bishop g4. Like, this is a standard position that you might get in one of my Caro-Kann games, or we could get an advance. Something like, I don't know, like a Bonnie bailout, maybe? Where you check, you bring the queen back, you take with the knight intending to go here, you're going to play e6, c5, and then knight e7, knight f5. But queen f3 just completely throws me off of my game. And it just doesn't make any sense, because queen f3 is meant to control this square, but it doesn't control that square at all. And I just play d5. And then he goes knight c3, and I'm like, oh, I can transpose into a position that sort of looks like the normal Tartakower, because if he takes with the knight, I will take and get that same structure, and if he takes back with the queen, I will just play knight f6 with a tempo. So obviously he would take back with the knight, and we get the same position, like the position I showed you earlier, where the knight is on this square. And I have this, but instead there's a queen here blocking the natural development square of the knight. So I was very happy at the result of this opening. Of course, the computer is like, it's zeros, Hailey, you're stupid, this actually has some merit. But yeah, I really like this position for myself. If I just get some rapid development, then I'm going to be doing very fine here. So my opponent goes bishop to e2. I was kind of shocked about this move too, because I was like, oh, the only square that you can develop this knight out to is h3. But I guess their idea was to take back with the queen. So this is actually kind of a little bit of a creative way to play. But black is better after either of these two bishop development moves, one of which I play because bishop d6 is the main move in the Tartakower. And my opponent just starts dubious. It's kind of like one of my opponents from last week's video. They just start dubiously grabbing space on the side of the board with their pawns without developing any of the other pieces. So g4, and there's no threat to that move at all. h4, my opponent is going all out. They're like, me see king, me attack. So bishop to e6, I'm just centralizing my forces. My knight, my rook, my queen are all ready to come out and do some damage, and my opponent is just attacking me with two pawns. Because it's really dubious, because the whole point of this pawn structure is to fortify the king and to control the knight that is usually on this square. So now it's even better, because my opponent is launching a pawn storm at it when it's literally built to defend against attacks like this. So opponent finally wisens up and goes d3, opening up the bishop, but the bishop doesn't really have any great squares other than e3. But now another purpose of the move bishop to e6 is revealed, and I was kind of shocked that he played this d3 move, because while it looks logical, another reason why you shouldn't have the queen on this square, bishop d5. And we have ourselves a delicious skewer on f3 and h1, and my opponent just simply loses a rook. So not only has my opponent thrown out weak pawns, they lost their rook and are now in a much worse position. Like, I just basically have Tartakower development, and my opponent doesn't have a rook, and he has two overextended pawns. So it would take some sort of miracle for me to not do good in this game. But we will see that will happen. I will definitely not convert this game cleanly. Rook to e8, just putting pressure on the bishop, another standard Tartakower development move. I'm still kind of in my comfort zone as far as what I'm doing. Whatever my opponent is doing, I've never seen before, but what I'm doing, I'm just doing off of book, off of what I've been taught in the Tartakower, right? d4 takes a little bit of space in the middle, kind of just, again, foregoing the development of any of your pieces, and just putting a pawn in the center, which can immediately be targeted by queen to b6, but instead I take advantage of this pin on the bishop, and I play knight to a6, intending to maybe go here, because the bishop can't take me. So c3 stops that. My opponent overreacts and doesn't develop again, and now I have another opportunity to develop the queen out to b6, but I play queen to e7, and the idea of queen to e7 was basically to stop this knight from moving, just to put a lot of pressure on that bishop. So g5, my opponent is just like, I have nothing else. I'm going to attack you with my pawns. And f takes g5, by the way. Like, this may look scary, but there's nothing here. There's absolutely nothing here. You have a bishop, so what? I'm going to kick it out. And that's kind of what happened in the game a little bit, but I don't take right away because I don't need to. I just improve my position with c5, intending a pawn trade to activate the bishop on this diagonal and to open up the c file to maybe bring my rook in. So gf6, and obviously I don't want to take with this pawn, so I take with the queen. There's still a pin on this bishop, so it can't take my knight. I'm keeping an eye on that. And now the bishop comes out. Like I said, the position looks similar. I just move the queen aside to e6, and we have rook to d1, which, I mean, I guess is understandable because now you have control of that file, but I might just trade the rooks in that position because I'm up material. Why not? cd4, rook to d4. So your rook is now in the center of the board, which I guess is okay. But now I'm just going to play h6 and kick the bishop back to e3, then bishop to c5, attacking the rook. And if the rook moves, I will then take on e3 and be completely winning. So that rook isn't scaring anybody. Neither is this bishop. So f6. f6 is a bit of a mistake because after bishop to e3, there is a threat on my king with the, like, let's say I do nothing here, I would lose the game to the move bishop c4. Uh-oh. Queen lost. But I noticed that after I played the move f6. It was after I played the move f6, I was like, oh my god, bishop c4. But then I saw that I had this pin still, and I was like, whew, Jesus. And my friend was like, whoa, what's wrong? I was like, I almost blundered my queen. So king to d1 intends to unpin and threaten this, but I go queen to f5, moving my queen out of the way, renewing this threat on the bishop, and also hitting this pawn. And they move the bishop back, hitting the pawn, but they allow my queen to infiltrate in with queen to b1. And of course, if they go here, I'm just going to take and clean house. So they block with the bishop. And now bishop to f4 is the best move because bishop to f4, the bishop can't take. And after the rook takes, then rook a to d8 check is like a slap in the face. Rook to d4, knight to b4. If you take, that loosens the guard on the rook, and there's pressure on c2, which I didn't see. So I went for the immediate rook a to d8, defending the bishop and preparing to move the bishop with a pin. But they break the pin and attack my queen, and here I make a very bad move. What I should be doing is sacrificing my rook to take the bishop because this rook cannot block. And after king to e2, rook to e8 check. And I'm still hunting the king, right? I was calculating that. It's not like that slipped my mind. I was constantly calculating this rook e8, this rook e1 check idea, but instead I played queen to a1, blundering queen to d5, and white is now better. Because if I play the very natural looking move king to h8, this threatens checkmate. And if I do my rook sacrifice idea now, king to e2, rook e8 check, king f3, the king is safe. I can't take the knight, obviously, because of checkmate, so I have to come back here, and then he just gets my bishop. So that is just this simple looking queen move just blunders an entire hit of counterplay, and white is just completely winning. But instead of that, white plays queen takes b7. White is like, me take free pawn and be completely losing again because of the move knight c5 attacking the bishop and the queen. But instead, I now play bishop to f4 because if rook takes, I take the bishop, and the bishop cannot take. But what I missed was this move knight to e2, guarding the bishop, attacking this bishop, and if takes with the knight. And then this rook sacrifice does not work because after this in king to e2, rook e8, then the rook can just block. My knight is under threat. My queen is kind of stuck over here, and white is completely winning. So I did not blunder that. I calculated against this move, and instead I just took, or I didn't take this, because that was hit by, just, it was defended by the queen, so I play knight c5. This idea from before, hitting the queen and the bishop, and the queen moves to f3, blundering the pawn, and now I'm just like, okay, whew, I almost lost it for a second there, but now I'm doing all right. Queen f5 threatens checkmate. Oh no, will I hang checkmate? No. It's not checkmate because here the king has a square. It's not like f8 is controlled. So there, and all I had to do in this position was play king to f7. That's all I had to do. This is hit by two pieces. The knight can possibly jump, and this is controlled. Like the white's king is on the verge of a very, very brutal death. But instead of that, I don't even think about it this much. I spent like 2 seconds on this move, and I play king to e7, hanging queen g7 with a draw because now my king has a very hard time escaping the checks, and I don't even have time to capitalize on all this pressure over here. So check, 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 and then I eventually decide to just run my king into the middle of the board, sort of thinking that any check that white gives me, I take the rook. Any of these checks are controlled by the knight. This one's controlled by the pawn, so I think I'm safe here. But just this, the king goes back, and queen to e3 check is now good. Because now you just have dominant control of these center files, and then bishop g6 check comes in, and the queen is lost. But my opponent loses the thread and doesn't follow that plan and plays bishop f5 check, which throws the game back into my favor because of king to f7. And now after queen to c7 check, I have the miracle move rook to e7, because if takes, it is checkmate on e1. I was very excited about that. But bishop to e6, exploiting the pin, but I can just take. But now this happens, and my king is in front of the rook and can't mate white. But I do find this continuation to simplify into a knight endgame, which is queen sacrifice on d4, takes rook d7, and then take. Oh my god. Oh, I was breathing pretty heavy after that because I was really worried that I was just going to lose in on all those tactical complications, but I still have a worse endgame that I need to win. So knight d3, I bring my king over to pressure the pawn, but they rotate their knight in just in time. I rotate my knight to attack it, and it can't go forward because the king controls that square. So king to e3, we trade knights, and this endgame is still winning for white because of the activity of the king. or it's not winning for white. It's drawing for white because white has more activity, but the pawns cancel each other out. Like no side can get any progress. Whatever pawn one king runs towards, the other king will run towards the other one, and they will both make queens and make a draw. Basically, is what the idea is. But I do not play this endgame smoothly from this point. I don't make a clean draw. Even now, the game doesn't end smoothly because king to g5, king e4. I play the disastrous move f5 check, allowing this. And you may be like, why is this so bad? Because if I go here, then f4 comes, blockading this, and then I push this pawn forward, and he blockades me here, and I have to give up my pawn and allow this. It's just a slow process of putting me into zugzwang, so that I have to abandon defense of my pawn and to clear the way for this one. It's just a slow and brutal way to lose this game. But he doesn't find it. He goes there, and then I throw it right back to him again with f4 check. Like, oh my god. What is wrong with me? I'm just allowing the king to get active. So king e4, a5, and this is still not the end of this game. a4, he blockades me. Now I have to give up the pawn, and he takes opposition. How on earth does this game end, other than white winning? Like, that's the question everyone should be asking right now. King e6, king g5, I go back. He's just trying to move his king so he can clear the red carpet for his pawn. f4, king g7, I take the opposition, and he pushes the pawn. He pushes the pawn in that position. All he had to do was play king to f5, and if I played king to f7, king to e5, and if I played this, king to d4. Because here, king c4, giving up this pawn to grab this and promote. Like, he can use that pawn as a decoy. He doesn't even have to push it through, but he miscalculates and allows me to get in front of his pawn, and my king is closer to this side of the board than his. So now it's back to a drawn position. Now it's back to the king stopping this pawn and these two canceling each other out. So f6, king f8, king g6 to king g8. And in this position, my opponent runs out of time. And I win. Now tell me you expected that. I dare anyone to tell me that you expected me to win that game. I was probably one of the more undeserved wins of my entire life, but I told my friend about it, and he was like, that's real interesting. But he doesn't know anything about chess, so all he had to do was listen to my incoherent ramblings about all of the blunders that I did. So anyway, let's go to the very next day, where I'm also having dinner with that same friend, and I play this game, which starts off with an English. And the opening is not the problem in this game. Like, I was very proud of the opening that I played in this game. c4, e5, d4, which is not good because takes allows a tempo with development, or a development with tempo on the queen. And then I just bring my other knight out, because I couldn't play d5 in that position, because I don't rush with taking center space. I just grab a development advantage while I still can. Knight c3, bishop to b4. This is just the ultimate challenge to white's setup, because this is not good. Like, sure, the bishop can come here, but then just knight e7 and castles. Like, there's nothing here for white. So bishop to d2, and I could still take this knight, but it's not really ideal. Like, you should definitely just be castling. But I played d6. I mean, d6 is okay. I'm just opening up this bishop in case this knight comes to f3, which it does. And I castle. I want to maintain some flexibility over where this bishop is going to go, because it might go here, it might go here to kind of eye this, it might go here to put pressure on this pawn because it can't be defended by d3, so b3 would have to be played. And so e3 happens, opening up this square for the bishop. I bring my rook to the middle, and bishop d3. And now bishop to g4, because my opponent committed this bishop to d3, and now I put pressure on this, because he would have to waste a tempo going back, and he wastes a tempo going back. And now what the computer wants me to do is to take, and then plop my knight in the center attacking this bishop, which I don't know why I didn't do. Because in this position, I was just sitting there looking at my phone, puzzling out what to do in this position. I was kind of in a mental rut during this day, chess-wise, and there were a lot of positions that I reached where I just did not know what to do. I was just thinking for a while. I was like, do I bring this queen up? Do I take? Do I take? Do I go here? Do I build up this? But eventually I decide on playing the move a5, which is also suggested by the computer, just anchoring in this bishop and taking space on the queen side. My opponent castles h6. Again, I just had no idea what to do in this position. Knight to d5. My opponent takes the initiative and exchanges off those pieces, but then allows me to get 2 tempi on his queen. And this knight before idea is actually kind of interesting, because takes opens up the a file and offers a tactical opportunity to play the move pawn to b3 sometime in the future, because if queen takes, there's a fork. And if pawn takes, there's some tactical complications that might happen in the future. So knight to d4. My opponent wants to exchange these pieces. Because if my opponent just sits idly back in this position and plays h3, I can drop the bishop back to d7. And let's say my opponent plays bishop to d3. Then the knight rotates over to hit the bishop. Bishop to e2. And I'm just improving my position. I'm going to bring my queen out here. I'm going to bring my rooks here, pressure this a file. You have to play where you are better. I created this imbalance by opening up the a file, so now I have to exploit it, right? But knight d4 stops all that because it basically forces an exchange of bishops. And then I kind of make a positional mistake here, in that I play the move c5, locking in this dark squared pawn structure, but giving the knight a very comfortable outpost on d5, which he does seize later in the game. Queen d3, and I play queen f6 attacking the pawn, so the queen loses a tempo to back up. And now in this position, this idea of playing b3 comes into fruition, because like I said before, b3, if queen takes, there's knight d2, hitting both of these pieces. But the interesting thing is, if pawn takes, then rook a1, you lose guard of f2. Like I said, tactical complications. It looks rather innocuous to just open up this file open up this rook on a semi-open file, but b3 is a very venomous move, and I miss it. I play queen to e6, just pressuring this pawn. And my opponent plays b3, stopping me from playing b3. And I play rook to a3, blockading, maybe trying to bring this over, freezing these 2 pieces in the defense. But again, my opponent can gain a tempo on the queen and rotate into the middle, which is exactly what they do. And now black is still better, but this knight is just an absolute thorn in the side of black. Like, this knight is really making me uncomfortable, because any weakness I make, it will be able to punish. So I double up here, blundering the move f4. A rather innocuous looking move, kind of like knight b4, but its true beauty lies in the fact of this knight. Like I said, this knight is a really annoying piece. So I can't go here because the knight controls it, and if I go to either one of these 2 squares, it's a fork between the rook and the queen, and the reason I can't go over here is because it's a fork between king and queen, and the queen is the sole defender of the knight, so it's not like I can go over here. I just lose the knight. So I'm really in a bind here. So I go there, he forks me. And I was sort of wondering whether he would actually take the rook in this position, because this knight is his most powerful piece. And the computer actually thinks that knight d5 is the best move, and my opponent agrees. So I go queen to e8 this time, forks me again, and then I go there. And now he should take the rook, because if he doesn't take the rook, I consolidate by defending the knight with my rook, not freeing my queen up, and now I can get counterplay with b5, trying to undermine the knight, and then maybe like doubling up in the future again when I move this. But f4 with very nasty intentions. If my opponent lands the move f6, it's over for me because my king will just be subjected to a barrage of an attack, aided by this knight and this queen. So knight to g5. I might have said f3 before, I meant f6, and my opponent lands the critical blow f6, and I am dead lost. f6, and I am dead lost. Again, I was eating lunch or dinner with my friend, and I just saw this move f6, and I was just like, I sat there, I was like, oh no, I am in trouble. Because if I take not knight f6, which is still a good move, but rook f6, you bring the other rook, you bring the queen, and it's just over. My king cannot possibly survive that attack. So f6, b5, I try my best to lash out, exploiting the pin on this pawn. And he makes kind of a rash decision here. Knight to e7. And then I get in front of the pawn. I blockade it like this, and now h4 is the best move because it displaces my knight from the square. I have to go back, and now cb5, and this pawn is unopposed and actually very, very powerful. Wait a minute. No, the queen defends that. I might actually be an idiot, but I guess the point of cb5 is that this can no longer be opened up, and this pawn is safe for now. Yes, I got there eventually, folks. So rook f2, and I'm able to land the critical blow of counterplay. B takes c4, exploiting the pin. Now I'm almost the one calling the shots again, although my king is still under pressure because this pawn will die. I have a pin here, but white is obviously still better. Rook a f1, putting pressure. One slow move too many. My opponent was, I guess, kind of thinking that I was going to take this, and then they were going to go here, and I would move, and they would like check and win, but like the knight is guarding that, and this pawn will fall no matter what. So I take. I'm unafraid of rook f7 because I actually will take with the queen and get take the two rooks off the board in favor of the queen, and it will be knight and rook against queen with a pawn advantage, which is actually okay for black. So I was calculating in my head that, and I was like, okay, if he goes into that, he's a fool. So queen takes c4 happens, and then I rotate my rook over, and he doesn't take on f7. He doesn't force me to even go down that line, so I bring my rook over to the defense, queen to g4, and now black is better again if they reroute their knight to c3. That's their own outpost, pressuring this pawn, because if this pawn goes forward, this is weak. And now the rook is frozen in the defense. Because these pawns can't be upset, because then these would become really powerful. So e4, and then I make kind of a disastrous decision here, trading the pawns to get the knight in the center of the board, and just the move rook to e2 is simply very good here because it attacks the queen and maybe gets into my 7th rank and infiltrates from behind. But I just get a fork. He just completely blunders a fork. And after queen h6, it's actually very tricky, this move. If you take the rook, you're still winning, but it's not as good. The best move in this position is g6. And the idea of g6 is that it hits the queen and the rook. And these two rooks are hit. So the queen has to move. And then you take this rook, because you can't recapture because the pawn defends it. That is just absolutely wild. All right, so my video cut out when I was making this, so I'm going to complete it now. You notice my theme has changed. It's a couple days later. But anyway, I just force the pawns off the board, and then invade, pick off those queenside pawns, trade pawns like this, and then I just use my rook and king to walk up the 3-on-0, bring the rook to the back rank, convert it, and we trade like this, and I win. And that's how that game went. No matter how chaotic it was, you can still maybe win. All right. That is all today, folks. I am the amazing Hailey, the gender fluid chess teacher, and I'll be back at you next week with Chess 102, and then on Sunday with Quest 1600 Week 3.